The 2 of discs is called change, and this card could be something like a depiction of the physical world that we live in, and a world of which when we examine it we find never rests, and so is indeed always in a position of change. On the Rider-Waite card we can see actually some of the symbols of which we see over on the Thoth, this image of duality and an Ouroboros-like thread of infinity here, being juggled by a character of which resembles in some way the Fool, hereby suggesting that we are on a journey to understand the universe. And we can see a sea in the background with its ups and downs, and so we're on a journey through all the good points and bad points and nights and days of life and the universe in order to come to understand it. And so that's why we see on the Tree of Life here that we're in Shokmar, wisdom, and it's Shokmar in the world of Isaiah, the world of the manifested world. So if we think about this like being the Lord of the earth, somebody of whom wants to survey his kingdom and come to understand every single bit of it, it's a coming into understanding of where we live, an understanding of how this place actually works. What is it that keeps it going, so to speak? Astrologically, it's Jupiter in Capricorn. This is quite interesting because the expansion of Jupiter is constrained by Capricorn, and so people that have this sign astrologically are usually very practical, and they're really good organisers in making things work, perhaps in business, for example, and that type of thing. And so really it's saying that when we come to understand that universe, we'll be able to organise all the things in the universe to make them work, to create good, perfected, physical things around us, homes and wealth and things of which make our life easier, or things of which are beautiful that we want to keep with us in the world, and just make our stay upon this plane more pleasant. Perhaps the most strong symbol on this card is the yin and yangs. So we have a lot of duality in the card. The card is extremely balanced. Everything in this card shows balance and shows essentially an equal and opposite reaction. We're going to come back to that. So we have these 2 yin and yang symbols, which of course means a dark side and light side, yin and yang. It's a complete and perfect duality, totally balanced with themselves, and so the top disc looks like it may be rotating towards the left, and the bottom disc is rotating towards the right. So you could think of that as a masculine and feminine force, and there is a depiction of that in these. And even the brain hemispheres, even simply night and day, or the passage of the year and the seasons of which come through it. So the actual yin and yangs are coloured, showing that the yellow colour on there is what you might call electric force, and the darker colours are magnetic force. And so these are force and form. So we put out a deliberate intention, and we put to work our actions to mould those atoms and molecules and electrons and things into those physical shapes around us. And the results of these things of which we make are always in direct correlation, so harmony, with the energy, the passion, the action of which is put into them. So it's a little bit like one of those Newton's cradle devices. If I let one ball go, one ball will bounce, and similarly if I let 2 or 3 balls go, then 2 or 3 balls would bounce. The ball being let go is the energy being put into it, and that energy is in direct correlation with the result springing forth there into the world. We can also see with this yin and yang that electric force could be the masculine force, so that's the yellow colour, and the darker force, which is the magnetic force, would be the feminine force, of course returning us to the moon, and of course that movement of tides and that movement of seasons. And so you can see that we're actually starting to understand how the universe works. This is what they mean by as above so below. To understand one is to understand the other, and what is true for the microcosm is also true for the macrocosm, and vice versa. We can also see very small, difficult to see in the card, in the eyes of these yin and yang images are the four elements of which make up that physical world. And so in the upper disc we can see fire and water. So that's an active and a passive energy coming together in complete harmony there. And therefore in the lower disc we see air and earth, again the active and the passive. And so there we see that everything in the universe is in complete harmony, and all of those, the growth of the seasons and the dying away of the season, and the summer and the winter, and everything's totally harmonious. You can't just wake up one morning and the seasons aren't changing. We know that the sun is going to rise again the next day, no matter how dark the night. And around these symbols of perfect harmony is this serpent image central to the card. And this serpent, firstly, represents something of that wisdom of Shokmar that we saw, so that coming into understanding of how the universe works. It can represent this as well, like simply that serpent we see in the Eden story, suggesting that to taste of this fruit, to come into an understanding of the universe, means you will become wise, and like God you shall know of good and evil. So you will know that there will be a winter, whether that's in ourselves or in the world around us, where things die away and it's cold and you can't grow the crops, and there shall be a summer, where it's all bright and wonderful, and it's a cycle of darkness and light, like we see with yin and yang. We are understanding good and evil. The serpent is also in the shape of Ouroboros. It's consuming its own tail. It's an infinity sign, and this basically shows that this change in the universe, these symbols of which it literally coils itself around, never end. And we understand therefore that we are living in a literal ocean of motion. Nothing ever rests, everything always changes. Everything around us that we see as being solid and having been there forever, even the mountains, in the huge great big rocks that form them, they're all moving, because they're all made out of these electrons and atoms and basically vibrations and frequencies. Our bodies are on the same frequencies as them, and so we interact with them in that physical way. We can knock against them and it would hurt, for example, that type of thing. But everything moves, nothing rests. Everything is a blueprint of form, of which has been formed in the human world by that coming together, that moment of harmony where the image in the mind is set through intention and will into actually giving birth to it into a physical form. And we see this as well, moving on with the card. On the snake are its spots, and its spots are octagonal, so they have 8 sides to them. Now this brings us to the 8th Sephiroth, of which is the splendour and glory of Hod. It's also ruled by Mercury, and here it represents intention and will. And so we're going to see the law of Thelema in this card. In form of a tarot card, this would be the Magician. This is our will, and we are circling around all these things in the universe on this serpent by the use of our will. And so we're not just going to sit here and, wait to die. We're going to go out into the world and make things happen, as we should be doing. And we do that via the use of our will. Do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. You are the end result of these wills and intentions. And so just as we've come to understand good and evil, or understand that there are a constant ocean of motion, there's an up and a down in everything. And the key here is that we are free with our will to accept or reject anything that comes our way. And so, when we watch the news and it's telling us fear, hate, death, disease, we can just reject that. When it tells us that, the economy's in a bad state and nobody's going to make any money, are you going to accept that and make that your reality? Or are you going to reject that and make your business successful via the process of your own intention, your own will, by putting a step forward and actually making things happen? You can accept or reject anything that comes into your world. This is your free will. And yet, you may feel drawn, of course, to certain ways of being, certain things of which mean more to you than others. There are certain things which are just not right for one person, there might be for another. And so we see on the serpent here, to represent this, the crown of which it is wearing. And this crown has 7 points upon it. This brings us to the 7th Sephiroth on the tree of life, of which is Netzach. And this is ruled by Venus, which is love. And so this is showing that we will find things in this constantly changing universe, of which mean a great deal to us, things of which we love. Can be another person, can be a physical thing around us, it can be an emotion, just something that grabs us in that heart and we feel drawn towards it. And this is the second part of the law of Thelema. This is love is the law, love under will. And so when we put those two things together, the octagonal spots on the snake and its crown, we have do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. And so we are going out there and using our free will and our intention to make all these things. And yet we also have underpinning that our true will, which is our purpose, for being here, the things of which draw us in a particular way, and that we, part of the whole so-called great work of Hermeticism is to discover your true will. And your true will is formed at its core out of love, which again is not necessarily romantic love or that type of thing. It's something deeper, it's something greater. It's like we've seen this type of thing said before, it's not I love you because I find you attractive. It's I love you because you exist. I love every single thing about you. And so that's the true will, and that's the crown. That crown could be Kether, that spiritual light of which if it wasn't for, the whole universe wouldn't have been born, and those electrons and atoms wouldn't be here to form things out of in the first place. It could also be what you may discover as God. And so, like we say to the mainstream scientist, they're not going to tell you anything of much value, but they will say energy is just there. And then the mainstream religionist also won't tell you anything of much value, but will say God is. God is just there, was there in the beginning. And they may actually go a little bit further and say God is love. And so there we have that love, that true will, that pure light, pinning all these decisions and all of these ups and downs together. Crowley describes this in the Book of Thoth quite cryptically with the equation of 0 equals 2. This means that the 0 is two opposites coming together so they cancel each other out. So we've moved from harmony in duality into a singularity, a point where everything is in union with itself. And then the 2 is going out into, again, duality. So if you look at that like the endless birth and death and recycling of the year, and even of entire planets, entire galaxies and entire epochs in time, of which come into being and go back into themselves and come back into being. Essentially, it's the interconnectedness of the all that is, of which brings us back to everything that we've been saying there yet again. And so to draw the card is all about that. It's showing that you can do these things, you can put your will into action, put everything into order around you. That life is going to have constant change. Your business will come in peaks and troughs, and this is just the natural way of the world. And yet it is within your power of acceptance and rejection of the things around you to make things happen, to put things into a certain direction, and then allow them to happen. And it's when we allow that and we accept that motion of change, of which underpins everything, that we ourselves come into harmony with it, and we allow it to come in its own way and its own time into the world until we can have it and hold it in our hands.